I recently heard an interesting statistic. Over 80% of single people over 50 say they are happy with their single status. I am one of them. But I bet most of them, like me, originally planned to achieve happiness by finding a new mate. Like me, they thought things were going to go just great in their second, third, or fourth round of finding true love. And then came the experience, so pathetic and humiliating that they realized how unbelievably happy they already were. In my case, it was a man named William. I met him at a party. He seemed okay in a California-y way. Bouncy, healthy, upbeat, and, he informed me, the author of an unpublished New Age novel. I prayed never to read it. 2 days later, he called to ask me out. Well, why not, I thought. My approach, especially since I'd already abandoned online dating, was to stay open to possibility. I told William I'd just heard an NPR interview about a performance at a local university by the actor Charles Dutton. He would be doing his monologue From Jail to Yale. William said he'd like to take me to the show, but warned he'd have to order the cheapest tickets available. I offered to pay for my own ticket, but he declined. We made the date, and I downloaded a coupon for dinner at a nice place near the college. When William got to my house that evening, he had more details to share. I wish I didn't have to tell you this, he said sadly. But I'm 54 years old, and I find myself homeless, jobless, and penniless. Really, I said. I slipped my restaurant coupon under a pile of newspapers and pulled out Tupperware containers of leftovers from the fridge. William dug right into the chicken parmesan and continued. All the business ventures he had going out west had tanked with the economy. When he ran out of options, he'd moved back home to Baltimore to stay on his mother's pull-out couch. She was a Holocaust survivor, he said, who was already taking care of his sister, a morbidly obese young woman awaiting gastric bypass surgery, and her boyfriend, a crystal meth dealer. Geez, I said. How is your mom handling all this? Well, he said thoughtfully, the Holocaust, it kind of put things in perspective for her. I think she's just happy to have her family around. Soon we were off to the show at Morgan State, where the will call line was so long and so slow-moving that I wondered if we'd get to our seats before intermission. It seemed that every single African-American person in the city of Baltimore was in attendance that night. No more than 6 seats in the auditorium were occupied by white people. Under the fluorescent beams, I studied my extremely white date out of the corner of my eye. His yoga-looking clothes, his salt and pepper hair, his smallish eyes. His lips were wide, very wide, like 3/4-inch lower lip, and deeply colored. In fact, I noticed, they were brown. What's wrong? Asked the man whom I then and forever after thought of as Brown Lips. What are you looking at? Oh, nothing, I said. We finally got to our seats, which were perched at a dizzying height above the stage. The monologue was already almost over, and Dutton announced that the remainder of the evening would consist of his doing scenes from Shakespeare with students from the Morgan State Drama Department. Without offering a single bit of background, like, this is a play about a bitter, insane old king who has 3 daughters, Dutton launched into a medley of scenes from King Lear. A procession of young actors in Elizabethan costumes swept onto the stage, shouting at each other in Old English, dueling, weeping, murdering, and then carrying each other's dead bodies around and weeping some more. There seemed to be no end in sight. Despite the mayhem on stage, soon our entire mezzanine, including my companion, looked as if sleeping gas had been released into the ventilation system. People collapsed over the arms and backs of their chairs, jaws dangling. Some sank into the pillowy bosom or muscled shoulder beside them. Others remained nearly erect, nodding as discreetly as junkies in a driver's education class. Waking and stretching when awoken by the applause, which was thunderous once it became clear that the evening was indeed over, my date gave me a sleepy smile. I felt guilty for having made him spend $35 on these tickets, and I said so. No worries, he said, but God, I could really use some ice cream about now. Ice cream? I said. I started racking my brain for a place that would serve both ice cream and alcohol, which I felt I needed as soon as possible. I made some suggestions, and I said I was buying. Oh, I'd just like to go back to your place and chill, he said. It was dark in the car, so he couldn't see the eye rolling. Oh dear, I said. I only have like one old ice cream sandwich in my freezer. I explained that the sandwich in question was a birthday party flavor, which meant that it had pastel-colored nuggets in it, and that it had been melted and refrozen during a tropical storm, but I was unable to dampen his enthusiasm. Home we went. Chill we did. He chose a spot on the couch, and I sat in an armchair as far away as I could without actually entering the backyard. Somehow we got on the subject of my fantasy beach house. Since our mother's death, my sister Nancy and I had been talking about getting a place in New Jersey so we could get together in our old home state. Brown Lips perked up at this news and suggested that he could move in and house sit if we did. Finding it hard to keep my mind on the conversation, I remembered suddenly I hadn't seen any of my road atlases since I moved to Baltimore, now going on 2 years. Where were those road atlases? Though I had not used a road atlas in a long time, I wanted to consult it to see if there was any way to get from my fantasy beach house to Baltimore without taking 95 through Delaware, which seemed to have been backed up with traffic for several decades. Whether it was ADD, OCD, or just desperation, I was suddenly driven to jump up and start looking for these road atlases in my office. He took this opportunity to put in a call to his mother, which I overheard as I pawed through a cabinet of gift wrap. No, Mom, just go to bed. Don't worry about pulling out the couch or anything that's too much for you. Please, just put a pillow and blanket out and go to bed. I won't be home till 3 or 4 anyway. Are you kidding? I shouted. I have to go to bed in half an hour. William rolled with the punches and told his mother he'd be home by midnight. At 11:15, I yawned and said, okay, well, I really needed to get back to looking for those atlases. He lifted his eyebrows and a smile curved his brown lips, which I had by now studied even more thoroughly with poor results. Well, he said suavely, before I go, how about some touching? For a moment or two, there was absolute silence. Then I couldn't help it. I started laughing. He looked hurt. Why are you laughing? He said. Guilty and red-faced, I said, oh, I'm sorry. Damn. What do you mean by touching? Well, he said, you sit next to me on the couch and I put my arm around you. I plopped myself down a few inches away from him. He draped an arm around me, then began to massage my shoulder, then drew me closer to him. I leaned into his sweater, hoping this would be the end of it. But he put his other arm around me and attempted to move into a hug position, his hands now fervently grasping and rubbing my back. I could almost feel his blood pressure rise, his muscles tense, the throbbing pulse between that tranquil California facade. I leapt from the couch as if ejected from a cannon, and he apologized, and somehow we got from there to the front door. I never did locate those atlases. But after this evening, there was no doubt that I was lost. None of the men I had met in the preceding months was even a distant relative of the one. On the contrary, each had nudged me closer to waking up from my girlish dream. Realistically, the mating rituals of people in their 20s and 30s might never work for me at this point in life. Through the pane in the front door, I watched William drive away down the street. Actually, I made sure William drove away down the street. I breathed a sigh of relief and I turned away. There was a shifting in the rumpled nest of woolen blankets on the love seat, the position from which my dachshund Beau had monitored all comings and goings from the house. He poked his long, velvety nose out between the fringes of the Afghan, an expectant look in his shining brown eyes. He'd known all along whom I would end up with in bed that night. And that, friends, is how you become a happy single person over 50.